Welcome back sa ating channel. Naging mainit nga na usapin sa mundo ng social media at tila nagsalita nga di umano si President Bongbong Marcos sa kauna-unahang pagkakataon dahil hindi na masikmura ang pagpatay sa isang gobernador. Tila nangako naman si President Bongbong Marcos na tila malilinawan ang kaso na to at umuusad na. Ayon pa nga sa naging kataga ni President Bongbong Marcos, "You can run but you can never hide." Ang maganda pa rito, 3 sospek ang nahuli na ng mga PNP. Tila malilinawan nga ang kaso sa pagpatay sa isang gobernador. Samantala sa isang banda ay tila sumabog nga di umano si Idol Raffy Tulfo tungkol di umano sa issue ng magsasaka at ng mga jeepney driver na pilit na gustong palitan ito ng mga moderno. Buwelta nga ni Senador Raffy Tulfo na mas lalong magmamahal ang pamasahe at mahihirapan ang taong bayan at mawawalan pa ito ng mga trabaho ang ating mga jeepney driver. Dagdag pa nga ng mga netizen, "As always, good job and thank you Sir Senator Raffy Tulfo, the fearless Tulfo. God bless you always and God bless the Philippines." Siguradong mahal ang pamasahe dyan sa mga bagong jeep na yan. Ordinaryong tao na naman apektado, kaya tumigil kayo mga hangal. Yes to Sir Raffy. Tama po, yun kinikita nga lang, kulang pa sa pamilya. Saan naman kukuha ng ganong kalaking pambayad? Tanggalin na ang LTFRB, pati tanggalan ng authority ang mga LGU sa mga public transportation. Thanks po. Napakapangit po ng sasakyan na ipapalit at traditional jeepney ng Pilipinas. Makakatipid sana kung gagamitin pa ang mga pwede. Kahit luma pa, walang mga awa at konsyensya na lalo pang pahihirapan po ang mahihirap na mga Pilipino. Well mga kababayan, para nga sa karagdagang impormasyon, panoorin nga natin ang buong video. At kung bago ka pa lamang sa aking channel, huwag kalimutan i-click ang subscribe button at notification bell para lagi kang updated sa ating mga bagong video. At para sa solid viewers natin dyan, maraming salamat sa walang sawang pagsuporta.
Senator Raffy Tulfo, Grace po, I would like to commend you on your passionate and in pursuing this resolution for our hardworking jeepney drivers. Mr. President, ang bottom line dito sa nakikita ko ay salapi. May mga gustong kumita. Unang-una na dyan, they're now salivating. Tumutulo ng laway nito mga taga-LTFRB na atat ng kumita ng mga pilak. God knows who does not pay. Alam niyo po yung sa jeepney? Nakalagay, God knows who does not pay. Maraming mga hudas. Yes, na gustong yumaman. Gustong tumiba-tiba. At the expense of the mga pobreng jeepney drivers. Just imagine, 2.4 million po ang halaga ng yung modernized jeep na sinasabi nila. At 300,000 naman po ang mabibigyan ng subsidy. So 2.1 million po ang kailangang pagbabayaran ng mga jeepney drivers. Alam naman po ng mga taga-LTFRB kung magkano lang po kinikita ng isang jeepney driver sa maghapon. Ang marami sa kanila hindi pa nga po makabuo ng boundary. Ang ilan sa kanila kahit isang tuka dahil nga po mahina ang kita. Pagkatapos kakargahan ng 2.1 million pesos na poproblemahin babayaran, ang kakapal ng mga mukha nito mga nagtutulo laway ng mga taga-LTFRB. At tama kayo, Mr. President, I agree with you. Yung mga taga-LGU, ay kanya-kanyang diskarte. Ay magbigay ng rota dahil gusto nilang sarilinin yung rota, kailan dumaan sa kanila. I have so many experiences, hindi naman po lahat. Ito mga taga-LGU, gustong kumita. Hinuhuli po yung mga jeepney drivers. Hinuhuli po yung mga tricycle sapagkat gusto nilang magkaroon ng sarili nilang unit. Gusto nilang maging mga operators. Marami din sa mga taga-LGU, again, hindi naman po lahat na mga loko-loko, unfortunately. Sa halip na kaawa ng kanilang mga constituent, mga taong bumoto sa kanila, yung pang kanilang mga ginigipit. FYI, mga taga-LTFRB, ang jeepney po ay parte na ng ating kultura. As a matter of fact, ang mga taga-ibang bansa, pinupuri po ang ating mga jeepney. At ginagamit po ito bilang tourist attraction sa kanilang lugar. Ipinagmamalaki ang jeepney natin. Pagkatapos tayo, ipipace out natin ang ganun-ganun na lamang. Ang kakapal na mukha nito mga taga-LTFRB. Ang kakapal na mga mukha nitong ilan mga taga-LGU. Hindi nag-iisip. Ang tanging iniisip lamang po nila, Mr. President, ang kanilang bulsa. And adding insult to injury, saan galing? Saan manggagaling itong mga jeepney? Galing ng China. Na kung saan, itong mga taong ito, ang hanggang ngayon, even while we speak, ay tuloy-tuloy na inapi ang ating mga mangingisda. Pagkatapos ang nating mga ngisda, tutulungan natin sila na para kumita, pagkakitaan, ang mga jeepney drivers. Para kumita, ang mga INUTIL na mga taga-LTFRB. Mr. President, baka marami pa akong masasabi. Bago ako ma-high blood, ang sasabihin ko lang, LTFRB, maghunos dili kayo. Dahil kapag hindi, pareho tayong sasabog, believe me or not. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, distinguished colleague.
Just a reaction. Thank you, Senator Tülfo, for your passionate speech. I know that you feel for the least of our countrymen. Alam niyo po, tama yung sinabi din ni Senator Cheese at ni Senator Tülfo. Pag itong mga binibiling mga modernized jeep na to nasira, wala namang mga dealers na yan dito eh. So yung mga parts, pahirapan ng pagkuha. Naalala niyo yung mga Mahindra noon?
Of course.
Diba? Naging problema din yan, diba? Bakit tayo nagsasettle sa ganon? So, yun nga, parang merong gustong kumita. Kaya sa hearing, gusto ko rin matanong, sino ba ang nagbibigay ng accreditation sa mga kooperatiba? At paano nila, kasi bago ka sumali sa kooperatiba, sasabihin sa'yo, oh, pero i-modernize mo yung jeep mo. Dito mo lang bibilin. So, may mga, diba, meron ng mga connection sila. So, yun lamang po.
Mr. President, next is Senator Bato de la Rosa, Mr. President. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from the province of Davao del Sur and Mindanao, Senator Bato de la Rosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, before I read my manifestation, I just would like to encourage the Chairman of Public Services na sana during her investigation into this issue, establish natin yung sinasabi ni Senator Majority Leader na may mafia na sa likuran nito. Kasi kawawa naman yung mga maliliit na driver natin na mahirap na nga, mamapyahin pa ng sarili niyang gobyerno. Eh kung totoo itong may mafia, dapat malaman natin ito, tulungan natin itong imbestigahan para malaman. Kasi there seems to be a scheme of everything. Membro ka muna ng kooperatiba, din pagkatapos sa membro, hindi ka magiging membro kapag hindi ka mag-procure yung jeep na modernized jeep. So sana ma-establish natin ito kung sino itong mga mafia na ito. And Mr. President, I stand before you today to join this August chamber in calling the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board to defer the scheduled phase out of all traditional jeepneys by June 30, 2023. The Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program of the Department of Transportation and the LTFRB has the most notable intention, and that is to provide a safe, convenient, contemporary, and state-of-the-art public transportation system. We in the government are doing our best to provide the riding public a hassle-free public transportation experience. However, we should be realistic in fulfilling this dream and acknowledge the difficulties that lie ahead. Ginoong Pangulo, kaisa po ninyo ako sa paghangad ng modernong pamamaraan at palakad ng pampublikong transportasyon. Ngunit, kailangan natin isalang-alang ang limitasyon at hirap na hinaharap ng mga driver na mga tradisyonal na jeepneys na namamayagpag sa ating mga daan sa maraming dekada na nakalipas. Traditional jeepneys, otherwise known as the king of the roads, have been the significant symbol of our busy streets in Manila. Even in the provinces, the sights of these iconic commuters to the respective workplaces and to reach their families back home after a day's work. Sa kagustuhan natin na mabigyan ng modernong mukha ang ating mga jeepney sa lansangan, naiisip ba natin ang magugugol na halaga ng mga drivers, operators at maging mga local manufacturers para maisakatuparan ang tinakdang programa ng DOTR at LTFRB para sa modernisasyon ng publikong sasakyan. Hirap. Nagkabulol-bulol tuloy ako to. We in the Senate are not insensitive to the plight of our drivers, operators, and local manufacturers. With the economic crisis brought by the pandemic, the transportation sector suffered much from the economic losses brought by COVID-19. With this in mind, utmost consideration, therefore, should be the burden that we pass on to our partners in the public transportation sector. Hence, I add my voice in appealing to the LTFRB to give more time to carry out the phase-out of our traditional jeepneys. Today, more than ever, our compassionate hearts should speak louder than the call of modernization. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, sir. Distinguished
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick reaction to the statements made by our dear colleague, my good friend, Senator Bato de la Rosa. I actually wanted to put on record, Mr. President, that no less than the Secretary of the OTR himself, Secretary Tugade, before the pandemic, Mr. President, told our staff in my office, here in this August chamber, Mr. President, sa kanya ho mismo nang galing. Ang daming mafia dyan. May mga mafia dyan. May mga corrupt dyan sa LTFRB. I just wanted to put that on record, Mr. President, that it's not just me, but even the then DOTR Secretary made mention of that words, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, I would also like to express I would like to recognize that, I would like to say that Senator Joel has always been active in our hearings. That's why all that he's saying is from his stock memory of what transpired. In fact, he was the one that brought out the issue that in his province, there are those that invested already in the modernization, in anticipation that the modernization will be fully implemented, bought already units to sell, but since the drivers themselves don't have money to buy the units, the ones that anticipated and invested already lost money. Di ba? Lumubog na yung negosyo nila. So that's all, Mr. President. I'd like to thank our majority leader also for taking active study and notice on this particular issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Madam Chair. Mr. President, next to make a manifestation is the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I think the sponsor just left the hall. Just two questions. Just a quick manifestation and perhaps 2 mini questions, Mr. President. Mr. President, as a Caviteño, Mr. President, I joined I think we should suspend for a minute, Mr. President. I joined the good sponsor in advocating the restoration of the dignity of our jeepney drivers. My former life involved me several years in having daily engagements with Fedjudap, Altudap, Pasang Mazda, etc., and Piston. And Mr. President, as a Caviteño, I grew up in an era wherein Leonardo Sarao from Silang, Cavite, was really the king of jeepney manufacturing, Mr. President. And the same is true with Malagasang jeepney coming from Imos, Mr. President. So, naniniwala po ako na kailangan bigyan po ito ng second look. But just the same, Mr. President, I'd like to pose this two questions, lingering questions, which probably would be answered during the committee hearing to be conducted, or perhaps today, if the good lady sponsor would yield. Mr. President, how much was the government expenditure, if any, what is the total amount if there were contracted loans made concerning this jeepney modernization program? So first. Second, was there a revision of the current car manufacturing program to include a hybrid jeepney modernization program? The reason why I'm asking this is because I've seen several versions. I've seen a van as big as a coaster with the nameplate jeepney. I've seen a minibus with designated as jeepney. I've seen a bigger version of a jeep with the inscription e-jeepney. So was there a revision of our existing car manufacturing program to include this program? Thirdly,
Mr. President,
yes.
I would like to thank our colleague from Cavite. In fact, these are precisely the questions we'd like to ask in the hearing because they haven't been updating us for so long. Yun nga, tama sinabi niyo, there's no uniformity or somehow it's based on the discretion of the cooperative. And number two, yun nga, with what you're saying about the hybrid part, diba? Kasi bago na, baka naman by the time ma-modernize, hindi na modern yung Euro 4 nila, diba? So, we will ask. And how much did they loan to these corporate, or how much was already disbursed in terms of loans or support, what do you call this? Support for the jeepney drivers, how much was the total? We will get that total, hopefully, from
Thank you,
Land Bank, DBP, and as well as the OTR.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thirdly, perhaps, were there importations processed or imported knockdown vehicles on the way, dubbed as jeepneys? Because during my MMDA days, Mr. President, I have seen several exhibits of various versions of jeepneys, different sizes, different shapes, all claiming to be the modern jeep. Are there current importation programs underway or approved previously, which would impact on this program as properly explained by the good lady sponsor? Those three questions probably, if answered during the committee hearings, would perhaps simplify and explain to our colleagues why this process should be stopped, should be improved, or should be given a longer transition period. That's all, Mr. President. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think with our colleagues raising all of these different issues, it's clear that June 30 of this year is not a reasonable deadline.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next to
Thank you
make a
very
short
much.
manifestation is the distinguished gentleman from Valenzuela City, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. I move that he be
A
recognized.
city that has a lot of jeepneys also.
Yes.
Thank you,
we
Mr.
recognize our distinguished colleague, Senator Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, initially when this modernization program was implemented, I found merit in the modernization program, Mr. President. Number one, it will transition the old jeepney vehicles to a much more modern, fuel efficient, as well as environmentally friendly. If Euro 4 is considered a little bit more friendlier than the usual diesel. It will increase the carrying capacity of our traditional jeeps from 12 to 20 passengers to about 30 to 40 passengers. But the most important, Mr. President, is the rationalization of the routes. That's the most important because to date, I remember, and this is the time when Senator Tolentino was our chairman of the MMDA. To date, there is no, as far as I'm concerned, there is no official passenger count per route. And it's very difficult to count passengers per route. So, in other words, coming up with a route rationalization plan really takes a lot of effort and science to come out with that. But I found merit in the modernization program, Mr. President. But the business plan of the modernization program has been thrown off, way off the original proposal. And one important reason to that, Mr. President, is the increase in fuel cost because of the Russian invasion. During the 2017 unveiling of this rationalization program, a portion of the fares earned by the jeepney drivers will go to the payment of the modern jeeps. At that time, Mr. President, the cost of fuel is about 20 to 30 US dollars per barrel. Right now, Mr. President, it's hovering around 80 to $90 per barrel. And we can see per liter cost of diesel and gasoline hovers around 60 to 70 pesos. So the take-home pay of our drivers has gone down dramatically, Mr. President. So paano ho nila babayaran pa yung modernization kung ang presyo po ng krudo ay napakataas at patuloy na tumataas dahil hindi pa ho tapos yung Russian invasion. And it can spike up until the threat of a global disruption is there. Prices of fuel can go up. So, Mr. President, I support the call of our good chairman of the Public Service Committee to look into this matter very carefully and have a longer hearing, Mr. President, because the business model has been thrown off by the increase in fuel. And ngayon ho, ang naiipit po sa gitna ay ating mga jeepney drivers, no? Dahil hindi naman nila kontrolado ang krudo, hindi naman nila kontrolado ang presyo ng langis. At sila po yung naiipit sa pagbabayad po nitong modernization program. So dapat po tignan ng masusi at mabuti kung yung business model ba right now is applicable pa o hindi na. So I commend the good sponsor for bringing this to fore. Thank you, Mr. President.
And before we recognize the next colleague who will